Mitzvah 247. Positive commandment to save the pursued from one pursuing him to kill him. This is found in the portion of Kisei, chapter 25, verse 11 and 12. And there the Torah says, if you see one man running after another one to kill him, we have the obligation to stop the pursuer from killing the one that is being pursued. Even though normally you need two witnesses and you go to court and you shouldn't be a vigilante, that is true only after one has committed the crime. But if you see one in the midst of the crime or trying to do a crime, then you have to stop them before they are able to murder the other person. And furthermore, the Rambam says in Mitzvah 293, negative commandment 293, the prohibition against sparing the life of the pursuer. In other words, if you can stop the pursuer by simply cutting off his hand or blinding him, then you should do that. But if not, then you have a right to kill him. Similarly, there's a prohibition of lo samoid al dam reyecha. And that is Mitzvah 297, the prohibition against keeping from saving a Jew if you see his life is in danger. As it says in Leviticus 19:16, do not stand idly by the blood of your neighbor. So we have these three mitzvahs that complement one the other. And furthermore, the Rambam says that this mitzvah extends to a concept if a baby is in the womb of its mother and the baby threatens the life of the mother or endangers the mother's life, then we have a right to end the life of the child to save the mother. That is as long as the baby does not stick his head out of the mother's womb. Once the baby sticks his or her head out of the mother's womb, then the law is that it's one life against another life, and we don't have a right to end the child's life. Similarly, says the Torah that this also applies to a rapist. If we see a man running after a woman to rape her, God forbid, or similarly a man running after a boy to commit sodomy. Here too says the Torah in chapter 22, passage number 27 in the book of Deuteronomy, Ki kasher yakum ish al reyehu uritzachoy nefesh kein hadavar hazeh, and that is when you see a person trying to rape another person, that goes into the category of murder. And therefore you have a right to stop that person before he commits this crime. This is the pshat, the simple interpretation of this mitzvah. What is the remez? What is the hint? The remez, the hint to this mitzvah is that the chinuch tells us that the reason behind this mitzvah is that one who is being pursued by the pursuer, his eyes and his heart is towards God, that God should come and bring salvation upon him. As it says in the book of Ecclesiastes, Valikim Yivakesh es Nirdof. And that is that God champions and God is looking to save this individual that is being pursued. And therefore, because this individual puts his trust in God, we now become God's emissaries to protect that individual and to bring salvation to the one that is being pursued. What is the drush? What is the homiletics, which is also the halacha, the laws pertaining to this? So we find an interesting question in medical ethics. If a person is dying, an individual refuses medical treatment, does the doctor have a right to force this treatment upon the person or not? And the Yavit says that yes, if it is certain that the treatment will help, then the doctor has the obligation to force, so to speak, this treatment upon the person. And similarly, we find that Moshe Feinstein also gives the halachic ruling that we have a right, so to speak, to force the treatment. However, Rav Moshe makes a stipulation, and that is that we should be sensitive to the patient and not to frighten the patient. And therefore it's important that we find him a doctor that he trusts, and therefore the doctor should, so to speak, convince him to take the treatment. This is similar to what we find that the Lubavitcher Rebbe would often respond to people who asked a question about health and about a doctor. The Rebbe would tell them to go to a Rodef Yedid, a doctor who is a friend. And here too we can say, because it's not enough that the doctor would prescribe the proper medication, but also that being a friend, the doctor would have the ability to soothe the person and to remove the fright from the medical application. Similarly, the Rebbe once told Dr. Ruth Benjamin, a clinical psychologist, pertaining to suicide, that the Rebbe told her she should explain the victims or the patients who want to commit suicide that suicide is murder. In other words, the body that we have is not ours. God gives every human being their body on loan. And therefore you have to protect that body. You must take care of the body. And you must nurture the body and feed the body. If a person wants to commit suicide, basically you are murdering your body. And you have no right to do so because it does not belong to you. It belongs to God. Furthermore, the Rebbe said that pertaining to suicide, that Dr. Ruth Benjamin should explain to Jews that being that we are coming now after the Holocaust, when 6 million Jews were slaughtered and killed, we have an obligation not only for ourselves to do Torah and mitzvot, but also we have an obligation to do the mitzvahs that they could have done and that they should have done. And therefore, by doing this, we empower the individual to take responsibility not only for themselves, but for others. This is the drush, the halacha, pertaining to the pursuer and the pursued. What is the soid, what is the esoteric level pertaining to this mitzvah? The Torah says in Leviticus, Leisamid al dam reyecha, do not stand idly on the blood of your neighbor. Why? Ani Hashem, I am God. Says the Arizal, Rabbi Isaac Luria, the famous Kabbalist in Shar HaPsukim. He says that we have to realize that if, God forbid, we cause one to die or we cause one to lose their blood, being that every human being is Adam Elyon, we are created in the image of God. So in essence, by diminishing their blood, we are diminishing the blood of God. And that is why the passage continues, do not stand idly by the blood of your neighbor. I am God because I am your neighbor. In other words, God is your neighbor. And therefore, by diminishing the blood of one's neighbor, you're also diminishing the blood of God. And therefore, one has to realize that murder affects not only the physical world, but murder affects also the heavenly worlds. And it goes all the way up to God, to the heavenly tribunal and God's holy throne. And therefore, the Torah says, Ani Hashem, I am God. What does Chassidus say about this? On this passage of Leisamid al dam reyecha, do not stand idly by the blood of your brother. Says Rashi, the classic commentator, Lirois b'misosoi v'ata yochel atziloi, which means that you see he's about to die, but you have the power to save him. Says the Baal Shem Tov that whatever a person sees or hears in this world, one must realize the fact that we saw it and the fact that we heard it is by divine providence. In other words, that I saw this and not somebody else is because God wanted me to see this. And therefore, I have to learn a lesson of how to serve God. When you see a person in a life and death situation, you have to realize the Gemara tells us in the tractate of Shabbos, page 77, side B, that God did not create anything in this world in vain. And furthermore, kol ma shebara HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'olamai lo yivra ela l'chvoidoi, whatever God created in His world, He only created for His glory. And therefore everything we see in the world has to be for God's glory. And when you see a person dying physically, the fact that you see him dying or that he's in trouble, it means that you have the obligation and you have the capacity to save that person. And spiritually, when you see a fellow Jew or a fellow person who is being severed spiritually from God, either because of the fact that he was not raised in a healthy environment or because he himself left this spiritual environment, you have the capacity and the obligation to save him. There was a story once that a chassid, a Biyana chassid, was blessed with twins, and one of the twins wasn't doing that well. So someone advised him he should ask counsel and blessing from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He wrote a letter to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe responded, you should go and see a Reifei Mumcha Yedid. You should see a specialist, a doctor, a specialist, and a friend. Already they went to many doctors, and they did not have any solace. But being that the Rebbe said to go to a Reifei Mumcha, a specialist, and a friend, they did not have a doctor, a specialist, a friend, but they figured at least they will fulfill one aspect of the requirement, and that is to go to a doctor who is a specialist. So they came to this doctor who was a specialist, and as they walk into the doctor's office, the doctor tells them, so how are you doing, my Yedid? How are you doing, my friend? He was very moved by the statement, and he asked the doctor, do you say this to all your patients? He says, no, actually I never say this to any of my patients. Why did you say it to me? He says, I have no idea. You came in and I was overtaken by this aura of your presence, and I felt I had to call you my Yedid, my friend. And so the chassid told him that, I wrote to the Lubavitcher Rebbe for a bracha, and he told me I should go to a specialist, a friend. So I know that you are a specialist, but now that you called me Yedid, now I know that you are my friend. And the doctor also felt that this was truly a blessing of the Rebbe. And Baruch Hashem, thank God, this child was blessed and saved, and they found a cure for the problem. So this is the idea of the mitzvah, to save one who is being pursued from one that is pursuing that person. This is true physically, but also true spiritually. And we hope and pray to see a time when there will no longer be death and no longer sickness, but a world of peace and tranquility with the coming of Mashiach speedily in our days.